Night Ad. Welcome to the presentation on Buddhism for the UMHS course on world religions. As you can see in this presentation, you see a picture of a very large statue. This statue is 80 feet tall and took over 120,000 stonemasons in 7 years to complete. Very fascinating. This is actually a picture from Flickr, and the information I have on it is from the Flickr photograph. So you might want to check it out. The web address is in the beginning, so just fascinating. Alright, next. So about this presentation. There's actually going to be two parts of the presentation for this section. The first presentation is going to be about the life of Buddha and how he went from being Siddhartha Gautama, I think I pronounced that right, to Buddha. The second part, which is a separate video, is on the tenets of Buddhism and different rituals. So if you just watch one, you're only going to get half the information, so be sure to watch both. So part one, from Siddhartha to Buddha. And I chose the image below because it's an unusual image for most of us. Most of us, when we think of a statue that represents Buddha or Buddhism, it's a person who's rather fluffy, a little pudgy, some pudgy cheeks, and in some places they think if you rub the belly of it, it's for good luck, things like that. This one, as you can tell, it isn't very fluffy. We'll come to that, so be sure to be listening for the stage of his life where he actually might have been emaciated like the picture. So the beginnings, around 8 to 6 BC, began the disillusionment in certain strains of Hinduism. These people started reform movements. A reform movement means you take what you have and you start to change it a little bit, hence the name re, which is again inform. Other people started new religious movements. And one of these religious movements is going to be Buddhism. So who is the founder of Buddhism? Siddhartha was the founder. His name, for the record, wasn't Buddha. Be listening for that too. You'll hear why that name is associated with it. He was born into a wealthy family. His daddy was a ruler in the region. And his mom, well, she died. Some say she died in childbirth with Siddhartha, but others say it was soon after. And Dad eventually remarried to his sister-in-law. Dad went to a Hindu prophet to find out about Siddhartha. And the Hindu prophet came back and gave him two things. One, he said his son would be very influential. The second part, he would be a homeless wanderer. Those two don't normally go together, but his dad had to think about it for a little bit. And what his dad did in response, well, we'll see in the next slide. So for reverse psychology, his dad wanted to protect Siddhartha. And so he basically had Siddhartha living in a bubble, okay? If you know that expression, right? He wanted him to be protected. And so Siddhartha, he never left the city that he was in. It was a walled city, so he's very protected. He had a good life, but he didn't know how the real world worked, okay? Go and ask your parents about that. Many people will describe their children as living in a bubble, like they're protected. The parents keep them nice and content, or sometimes on a college campus, sometimes people refer to that as being in a bubble because it's not quite the real world. And that's sort of the way Siddhartha was being raised. Siddhartha got married, he had a son, but he wasn't really happy, okay? He named his son a name that means chain. Okay, you've heard the expression of somebody describing their spouse as their old ball and chain. Well, he named his kid that, which had to be kind of sad for the kid. And so his father finally agreed to let him go out into the real world. Okay, and he had a big parade. It was going to be a big deal because he's leaving the city walls. And his dad ensured that he would be safe. But being safe physically doesn't mean you're going to be safe emotionally or spiritually. And that's what happens. Siddhartha ended up seeing some different things that he didn't quite understand. He saw two old men, and he saw them and he thought, oh my goodness, it greatly affected him. He also saw sick people. He didn't know about sick people. He was always protected from these things. And he also sees a death. He saw someone getting burned on a funeral pyre. A funeral pyre is where they stack logs, usually in like a little structure, and they put the body on top of it and they light the whole thing up. And so he might have been protected with bodyguards and whatnot. But emotionally, he was in for a shock because he got to see the people that were sick, that were old, that were hurt, and that were dead. So he didn't know quite how to handle that. So, the 5 ascetic Hindu monks. Okay, ascetics renounce things for a religious purpose. They have usually a robe, a bowl, and you notice that one of the 5, he seemed a little better than the rest. So, he went and left home, and he joined up with these homeless wanderers. And they had a freedom that he didn't have. Okay? So think about that. He had everything most people would want. He lived in this walled city. He was safe. He had everything he wants. But he wasn't content. And so he leaves and joins up with these guys. And he spends 5 years with these monks and kind of becomes a leader for them. So here's some stuff that he did. He would sleep on nails. He would stop breathing for a time. He would live on 1 grain of rice a day. He eventually looked back and realized he was really skinny, okay? He even would pass out from weakness, from hunger. And he thought that was suffering too. Remember that picture of the statue with him being very emaciated? Well, that's a statue that represents the stage of his life. So once again, he's in the walled city, but he's not content. Now, he's out of the walled city, he's with these guys, and yet he's still not content. So, think about it. He wants to find a different way because at the top, he was trapped. At the bottom, he was suffering. And so he concluded that if you're not at the very top and not at the very bottom, there's something here. So there's going to be a middle way that he's going to be able to look for and find a balance, right? And so this life of meditation was part of discovering this middle path that he's going to seek after. So the new name, remember, I told you about the new name? Okay, so how did Siddhartha get the name Buddha? All right, so that's not a nickname. You would probably call him Sid or Heart or something. Not Buddha. He was meditating under a tree and became enlightened. What kind of tree was he under? A fig tree. And locally, it was called a Bodhi tree. Once again, pronunciation, not exactly sure. But he took on the title Buddha, which came from that tree. And that, since he was there under the tree when he was enlightened, it kind of became associated. A guilt by association, right? So Buddha became the one who is enlightened, or the one who is finally awake. So his first followers, the people that he was first with, well, those became his followers. And this happened when he was around 40 years old. These followers took what they learned and then they would teach other people. And then they would create monasteries, or sanghas, the name for it. And the monasteries would house monks, and these monks would go and live there and learn how to find that middle path that Buddha would teach people about. And that middle path would hopefully lead them to a path that didn't leave them trapped and wouldn't leave them suffering. So family matters. His stepmom came up and wanted to join. And Buddha said, nope, you're a woman and we don't let those in. All right? But then she went back and came back with 500 other women. Okay? So she came in force and asked to join again. He said, nope. He's like, women can't do this job. Okay? But they did not back down. They want to be part of it. And so the disciples told Buddha, hey, you might want to reconsider. Here she is. There's 500 more of them. Wow, that's pretty cool. And finally he said, okay. But with this one caveat. He said, if Buddhism is to last 1,000 years, it would only last 500 years with women. Drat. So that's unfortunate. But the women created their own group, and there actually is a sacred text, the Therigatha, and it is a sacred text written by women. So, girl power for you on that one. Don't forget the names of these things. It's important. Okay, so Buddha is gone. He died when he was 80. Okay, so roughly he had about 40 years of his life teaching and spending time with these guys. Many people believed he died of food poisoning. And when he died, Buddhism was mainly in a little pocket in northern India and Nepal. So a social structure from that was established because people could become monks, and then people could support these monks, okay, or support the monasteries. So you have people doing work or doing study to try to find this middle path, and you have other people around them who can donate to them to help them out. Okay, these practices of helping the monks or helping the monasteries helps with their karma. Okay, and you might have learned about that in another presentation, and so more on that. So Buddha never really wrote anything, okay, or if he did, it just wasn't preserved. The Dhammapada, which pronunciation, I always apologize for pronunciation, but hey, that's not my forte. So, earliest written collections of the teachings of Buddha are called the Dhammapada, and his teachings were orally spread, and then a century and a half later, they were written down, okay? So you'll see this in some of the other presentations about different religions. Some of them were very, very, very old. Well, some of them predate alphabets for their language, so everything is traditionally passed down through language, which means through just the spoken word, songs, stories, folktales, things like that.